Everyone, bienvenidos. Welcome to our first inaugural Beat Not Beat Spotlight Series event where we're going to be hosting former LA Poet Laureate Luis J. Rodriguez, and I can't think of a better way to start this series of spotlight events. Usually the way we've been doing the Beat Not Beat events, we've been having like a group of poets. They come up and read their poems, and we wanted to kind of switch things up and, you know, as the series indicates, spotlight a certain poet from the collection. So Luis, thank you so much for, and actually Luis was the, when I got the idea for Beat Not Beat, Luis was one of the first poets I reached out to, and when I was just trying to get my legs and how to put it all together. So thank you for being a part of it. That really means a lot to me. I have some notes here because I want to make sure I thank everyone. Welcome to everyone here that's live, everyone in live stream land, thank you. Also, thank you to Jackie here at Tia Chucha and Brian handling all the technical end of things. Huge thanks to Moontide Press for putting out Beat Not Beat. Eric Morago, thanks. Also thanks to my fellow editors, S.A. Griffin, Alexis Roan Fancher, and former San Francisco poet laureate Kim Shuck. And in support of Luis today, we have an incredible lineup of poets in the anthology. Annette Cruz, Dennis Cruz, they are doing their first Beat Not Beat event today, so I'm really happy they're here. Yeah. Woo! Louisette Resto, Matt Cedillo, and you know what? Let's just, yeah, so each poet will be reading their poem from the book and either another poem or a segment from another poem. So let's jump right in. First up, Annette Cruz.
Drop this down a little bit. Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting us to participate in this anthology or to submit pieces for consideration. This is a really awesome collection of California poets, and then to through several mishaps and reschedulings, this is our first attendance for Beat Not Beat. We've had a couple of health issues, a couple of car accidents, and just life. And so it's an honor to be here. We've been wanting to read at Tia Chucha's for a really long time, for 20 years maybe. And it just happened to be here, and it's an honor to be able to share. First of all, I'm going to read a poem from a person who is no longer with us. And because me and Louisette were going to read the same person, we didn't want to take it outside and fight over who was going to win. So I offered to downstep and read Charles Bukowski, because we actually me and Dennis have a 21-year-old son who is named Henry. We named him after Charles Bukowski. So I'm going to read The Tragedy of Leaves. I awakened to dryness and the ferns were dead. The plotted plants yellow as corn. My woman was gone, and the empty bottles like bled corpses surrounded me with her uselessness. The sun was still good though, and my landlady's note cracked in fine. An undemanding yellowness. What was needed now was a good comedian, ancient style, a gesture with jokes upon absurd pain. Pain is absurd because it exists, nothing more. I shaved carefully with an old razor, the man who had once been young and said to have genius. But that's the tragedy of the leaves, the dead ferns, the dead plants. And I walked into the dark hall where the landlady stood, execrating and final, sending me to hell, waving her fat, sweaty arms and screaming for rent because the world had failed us both. And this one is a tough one to submit. I had never submitted it before. I did read it out in public. I wrote it to be shared in person, but not really to ever be published. And it's only because the person in this poem is still alive, but I had since changed my mind and submitted to this because I read this once for Luis Rodriguez at Beyond Baroque. And after our conversation about my poem, I decided it needed to be out there in print. So it sucked being a teenager in the 80s. And out of respect, I'm just gonna wait a little bit because I was a teenager in the 80s. So we could imagine what that was like. I was molested at 14, pregnant at 15, gave birth to my son at 16, got kicked out of my home at 17, gave birth to my daughter at 18, moved into my first apartment at 19, and had my first nervous breakdown at 20. I asked my mom for birth control in the 80s, but we were Catholic. Instead, she held Bible study in our dining room every Wednesday in hopes it would curb my very active libido. I asked my mom to help me get an abortion in the 80s, but we were Catholic. She made me keep it, even though I wanted to graduate from high school and go on to college. ITT. I really believed computers were the future. Instead, she forbade my baby's daddy from coming over, and I had to pray the rosary 3 nights a week on my knees so God could forgive me and the shame I brought to my family. My baby's daddy loved PCP in the 80s. And he was serving 16 months at Eastside for stealing cars by the time our son was 6 months old. I moved out of his Mama Chica's house when he got released from juvenile detention and came back home to me with a growing belly carrying another boy's baby. That was due in just 2 little months. My first baby's daddy was a piece of shit anyway. He stole money from my wallet that I earned from working at McDonald's in South Pasadena, selling my grandmother's ring, selling my grandmother's ring given to her by my grandfather when they were young and in love. That ring was given to me by her. I confronted my molester in the 80s and I asked him, why did he do it? It was love, he said. And I realized then he was the reason I was so promiscuous. I was not a whore or a slut, and I was especially not looking for love. I was running as far as I could from the memory of that grown man who did a lot of cocaine in the 80s. My father, son of my grandfather, son of my grandmother, the ring giver, you know, the ring given to me by her. She gave birth to that grown man who was bolder than any junior high school boy I had ever known. As he laid his hands and mouth upon my body, I did get him to stop his rape, but it did not stop me from becoming a victim. It kept me secretly tied to my obsession with taboo pleasures. But we were Catholic, and coming to terms with perversions isn't something Catholics do, especially in the 80s. Thank you.
Annette Cruz. Yeah, there we go. I was so focused. Oh, if you're wondering, did he change his glasses? Yes, I did. I was so focused on making sure to thank everyone that I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Rich Ferguson, lead editor on Beat Not Beat, and again, we are here to celebrate the Anthology, Tia Chucha, Luis Rodriguez. Up next to read some great work. I'm so happy to see him here. I haven't seen him in a while. Dennis Cruz.
Like Annette said, it's an honor to be here. It was an honor to be invited. It was an honor to be invited to submit for this collection. And the biggest of all was to be actually included. For anybody that hasn't flipped through here, we are among giants in this beast of a book. So really quick, I wanted to share a little story. I'm going to be reading a little piece of mine and then a piece by Bob Kaufman. Just a bit of trivia. Probably about 1997, we were living in Highland Park. There was a little bookstore across the street. What was it called? Royal Books. And I bought both a book by Bob Kaufman and Luis Rodriguez there. Both big, huge inspirations to me then, so full circle moment for me here. Luis, love you. This one is called Bob Kaufman, Would You Wear My Eyes? Bless you. My body is a torn mattress, disheveled, throbbing place for the comings and goings of loveless transients. The whole of me is an unfurnished room filled with dank breath escaping in gasps to nowhere. Before completely objective mirrors, I have shot myself with my eyes, but death refused my advances. I have walked on my walls each night through strange landscapes in my head. I have brushed my teeth with orange peel, iced with cold blood from the dripping faucets. My face is covered with maps of dead nations. My hair is littered with drying ragweed. Bitter raisins drip haphazardly from my nostrils, while schools of glowing minnows swim from my mouth. The nipples of my breasts are sun-browned cockleburs. Long-forgotten Indian tribes fight battles on my chest, unaware of the sunken ships rotting in my stomach. My legs are charred remains of burned cypress trees. My feet are covered with moss from bayous flowing across my floor. I can't go out anymore. I shall sit on my ceiling. Would you wear my eyes? This one I wrote probably last year, sometimes during the COVID haze that we were all trying to maneuver with. There was a lot of beer going on at that time, if I'm being honest. This one's called Head Stop. Head, stop. You're nervous. You should drink. Hey, you got any of that other stuff left? You should have a little of that. Not too much. Listen, relax. You should have another drink. It's still early. It's getting late. That shit is all in your head. There's no secret message in that book or that part of that song. That was just your mind assimilating chaos again. Don't forget, you're afraid of chaos. It sets you off. You're not good with the heavy stuff. Go slow at first. Don't binge. You dreamed that, remember? And it didn't end well. You woke up, remember? Waking up is not how you wanted it to end. Thanks.
Dennis Cruz. It was really great to hear you, well, it's great to hear you, but it was also great to hear you read the Bob Kaufman poem. We did an event up at the Beat Museum in San Francisco on Friday the 13th of January, and I had completely lost my voice. So and I read the Bob poem, but my voice couldn't go above a whisper, so it was really great to hear you just own it. So thank you. As Dennis said, I feel very fortunate to have worked with editors that helped to make this a formidable collection. How did you describe it had, Dennis, you said it was...
It had a bludgeon weight.
It has bludgeon. For those of you out in live stream land, I don't know if you can appreciate, but it does have bludgeon weight. Louis Vett said it has girth. You could describe it that way. It does feel good in the hands. No, we're not describing Louis. Ferlinghetti, Bukowski, Diane DePrima, Wanda Coleman, Jim Morrison, just very current LA poet laureate Lynn Thompson. The list goes on and on. And also the poet up next, who's amazing, and Louis Vett Resto, and she's also going to be reading a poem by a poet I dearly miss, Yvonne de la Vega. So up next, Louis Vett Resto.
Yes, it has bludgeon, you said bludgeon? Right. But it says beat beat the beat so you can beat somebody. You can, if it's necessary, you can beat someone with the beat. So yes, I'm going to read a poem by Yvonne de la Vega. If you have the book, she's on page 99. It's titled, I Write and I Fuck. I write and I fuck, neither of which make any money, yet both are done to stay alive. Both are accessed by keyword love, both shut down by the same. Both are a gift of which neither should be in any way abused. I fight the good fight if it fall before me. Anything spilling onto my path is a full can of clear choice. Overall, I'm here to remind that we are all in this together. See people, ask for prayer, especially old homies gone religionistic. I never ask to what address are your prayers sent. Who is the recipient of my pleas for you? I shall never discriminate any of the many names of the Most High. I know God is everywhere. And see, no matter what is taught, I know that yes, Jesus fucking loves me. And he hears our tones, muses at human words, and doesn't care about the way it sounds as much as he can hear the brilliance and the honesty of the tune within our hearts. You see, Jesus doesn't think in English as much as he feels our universal music. And Jesus is fucking cool. He says that words are keys to turn on songs in muted hearts, and he can hear those prayers of words unspoken. And I'm not going to hell for saying or writing fuck. I write and I fuck. Sometimes I write fuck and I can't fucking write. And while I never write when fucking, I truly do fuck with writing. I write and I fuck, both are divine and holy. Both are a gift, each of which should never be abused, neither of which make any money, yet both are done to stay alive. Both are accessed by keyword love, both shut down by the same. Yvonne de la Vega presente. And this is my poem. I am 43, still stealing cigarettes from my mother. 2 decades since my first drag, I find myself stealing cigarettes from my mother's stash, held in the top left-hand kitchen drawer. She doesn't count them like I did in college when Lucy's could be bought without getting one killed. They were expensive even back then, when I was known for throwing lit cigarettes at people, particularly men with their inane conversation starters. Growing up with the chain smoker, I vowed my disgust, the Newport menthol smell attached to my Catholic school uniform, overpowering the Aquanet in my bun. My abuelo looked down on smokers, so naturally all of the women in my family smoked out back when he was asleep or working late nights at the bodega, the same place where they would buy the cigarettes. They didn't want any part of Pedro's wrath. Las mujeres decentes no fuman. Smoking was for whores, women with low morals, women who fought on command. Inhaling the nicotine outside of my mother's house, I think about the first time I gave a man a blowjob, allowed a man to put his hands on me, watched my mother show me how to fight. Perhaps Pedro was right, as I squashed the cigarette butt back and forth with the heel of my shoe.
Louisette Resto, thank you. Yes, give her another hand. Been very fortunate to have Louisette and, there he is back there, and our next poet. They've been able to attend and read at a couple of our events, and it's always great to have you involved. Up next, a world traveler, jet setter, international poet, spreading the good word all around the world. Let's welcome Matt Sadia.
Hey, give it up one more time for Rich. But books don't edit themselves. And give it up for Eric Morago. Books don't publish themselves either. In my lifetime, there have been 2 people, and I'm going to tell you about both of them, who have really opened doors for me. There's a number of people that have been like contemporaries of mine, people that I've worked with, who I have nothing but admiration in my heart for, but there's people, coming before me who actually really went out of their way to help me. And I'm going to tell you about both of them. But first, I'm going to tell you about the first one who was in this book and is no longer with us. And his name was Jack Hirschman, and he was the poet laureate. And Jack took an interest in my work. I met him through Mark Lippman, who was running at the time. This was before he had Vagabond, so he was still kind of working with Casa de Poesia. And Jack took an immediate interest in my work, and he invited me to come read at the San Francisco International Poetry Festival back in 2012 when I totally did not deserve that. That was, maybe since then I've done some things, but at the time I was just some guy. And he actually gave me the final night to read alongside Amiri Baraka. So it was me and Amiri, and I read for 20 minutes, and Maria read for 20 minutes. It was just Sadio and Baraka. And that was the position Jack put me in 2012. And I'd only been writing poetry at that point for maybe 3 years. And so it was totally, it's not me bragging, I totally didn't deserve that. But it was because of that that Jack really pushed me forward. He really propelled me to the point where now, yeah, I do travel all over the world. But so yeah, so I'm gonna read a poem by Jack, and I owe so much to Jack. And that's just what I'm gonna say. This is Path by Jack Hirschman. Go to your broken heart. If you think you don't have one, get one. To get one, be sincere. Learn sincerity of intent by letting life enter because you're helpless. Really, to do otherwise, even as you try escaping, let it take you and tear you open. Like a letter sent, like a sentence inside, you've waited all of your life, though you've committed nothing. Let it send you up. Let it break your heart. Brokenheartedness is the beginning of all real reception. The ear of humility hears beyond the gates. See the gates opening. Feel your hands going akimbo to your hips, your mouth opening like a womb, giving birth to your voice for the first time. Go singing, whirling into the glory of being ecstatically simple. Write the poem. Yeah. And so the second person that really opened a lot of doors for me is none other than Luis Javier Rodriguez. And with Luis, there's so many incidents, but there's one that really kind of sticks out for me. And it was back at AWP when I was here in Los Angeles. It was an offsite at Avenue 50, and there was gathered all these people. And Luis was saying he was going to get an award, and he said that, and we had done some college together, like in a few months earlier, and he said that, you know, the Chicanos get a bad rap, that we're all crabs in a bucket. And I stole this exact speech, and I said the exact same speech in San Antonio years later. But he said, we're all crabs in a bucket, and nobody here supports each other. No one cares about each other. And unfortunately, sometimes that's true, but that's not been my experience. You know, in my experience, Juan Felipe Herrera, you know, he lifted me. In my experience, Sandra Cisneros, she lifted me. In my experience, and Luis goes on this list of names of all these people he's grateful to. And then he said, and Matt Cedillo is someone I'm working with now. And that was in a room full of all these movers and shakers, all these people who publish, whoever. And one of the people in the room was a guy named Edward Vidyari, who would go on to publish me years later. And I'm sure, and that was the first day I met him. So I'm sure that left quite an impression. So it was very easy for me to get the book published. So I owe so much to Luis. I mean, the prison job I work now that allows me to like live, I owe to Luis. I owe so much to Luis, and I'm so eternally grateful. And every time I see you, I always feel the need to tell you that. So, all right, Luis J. Rodriguez. All right, so this poem's called "City on the Second Floor." It's a title of my title poem. It's a poem. My latest book's called "City on the Second Floor," and it's based on the Hotel Bonaventure, where people can come and basically come to Los Angeles and never walk the streets where people have to catch a bus or are on the streets, and basically has an entire city on the second floor. And it's a lot about kind of the illusions that we get when we're not all the way desperate and we're not wealthy. We're somewhere in between, and we think that we're closer to the billionaires than we are to the street. And that's just not true. City on the second floor. Here we go. There's a city on the second floor. International destination whose entrance is prohibited to all those appearing too poor for travel. Where commerce crosses bridges of wire and concrete just above streetlight, rises an economy of scale. Where buildings and offices connect to disconnect from the world below. Here, in the space between worker and destination, conversation spins profit. And no one moves without reason. And no one speaks without purpose. Here, the word is still born a commodity. And the world dies anew. Here, Working stiffs spend wages in cheap imitation of their own exploitation, arrogant, delusional, walking dead, laughingly dreaming of a penthouse suite they will never reach while staring from terraces towards the street below. Thanks so much.
That's Sadia. And now to our inaugural Beat Not Beat Spotlight Poet. Again, a poet that I have, for whom I have tremendous respect, admiration, and again, when I reached out to you to be in this book so early on, you said yes, and that means a lot. So, thank you. Luis J. Rodriguez.
Well, this is beautiful, and I'm thank you for all being here. Rich, great book, all the editors, Mood Tight Press, everybody we need these books, and you're doing it. And so I have to thank everybody that participated, all the poets. I wanted to read some poems I don't really read that often, so that I could share some other stuff. And I'm not going to have any particular order to when I'm going to read them, but I do want to say one thing, because you guys brought up people that mean a lot to me. When I first started going around with my poems, I was 24 years old, it was 1978, and I went all over the LA. There wasn't too many places, but I went to El's Bar, I went to all the places that were, everybody's reading, I'm getting up there reading. And I remember going to a workshop and showing my poems to this teacher, and that teacher says, "This is the worst writing I ever saw." And even told me, "You should give it up." Thank God I didn't. Poetry has been the lifeline. And, but it's sad that people would do that. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Some people give up when they hear that. Fortunately, I was a kind of a honorary guy, so I got pissed off. Yeah, I was like, no. Yeah, I was that kind of guy, which is kind of good. The other person, though, I do want to say that I did walk into a workshop with Wanda Coleman at that time, and she was completely different. I just happened to walk in there. She was at Beyond Baroque, and she was so accepting, but also she was so good about just being nurturing, and that's what helped me. Maybe more than anything else, is that there was people like her, and she's gone. But I always say that Wanda is really LA's perpetual poet laureate, and her impact is immeasurable. I wanted to read this poem I hardly ever read, and I don't write. Some people know I was on heavy-duty drugs when I was a teenager. I was on heroin for 7 years, and I don't really write that much about it. It's in my memoir somewhat. I don't really get into there's a lot of stories with this. But I want to share at least one of them. I'm starting to write a little bit more about it because I have a granddaughter that's in prison for crystal meth. And then I realized, I've written letters to her telling her more about what I learned, what I went through, so she would learn and hopefully not get there. And you guys might know I had a grandson who passed away from fentanyl 2 months ago. So it's sad when your own family is getting caught up in this world. So I'm gonna read one that I wrote. Micaela was one of my partners in drugs, and unfortunately she passed away on a heroin overdose. But we used to go to Evergreen Cemetery, and on the headstones, those nice old headstones that are there, we would lean against them and write poems. And we would do it while we were chipping, while we were shooting up, so it's like, it was just what we did. And I called her Michelle, but her actual birth name was Micaela. So I used Micaela, even though we called her Michelle. That was her name. So, Tombstone Poets. Leaning against fractured tombstones, we wove poems, Micaela and me. Grabbing strands from sunken lives, creating an alchemy of words interlaced with a needle-induced glow, sparking prose out of the poverty of unreason. Ragged memories push tongues into cheap chatter, recalling port wine jail nights, the terror time between 2 a.m. and the first light of day without lovers. And the Tecate look in her smile, so distant even as she gazed into my eyes here beneath sight, sun. I just remember when she passed. Precious, precious, precious. The noon hours at Evergreen Cemetery, paper lunch bags at our side. Even now, I hear the humming from her soul. But heroin took her home from me. Strings of words suspended in mist like broken webs. Only protruding headstones remain, mute witnesses to when life glowed a fire, when Micaela and me wove tempestuous silk, leaning on slabs of chipped stone. And I'm thinking about my grandson Joshua, and I haven't been able to write about it yet, but I will. These are things that happen in life, and poetry is the one thread I pull that keeps keeping me going, keeping me alive. So I really believe in it. I want to read a poem. People brought up Jack Hirschman, and Jack Hirschman was also a teacher of mine, friend of mine, a mentor. He opened doors to a lot of people, as Matt brought up, and he knew Bob Kaufman. He came out of that whole world, and he was a very nurturing person, which is why I have to carry that forward. And I know Matt and others are doing that. We have to keep engendering new poets and help guide them like Wanda Coleman did. Wanda, by the way, was an easy person to deal with. I don't know if you ever knew her, but she was always good to me. I've seen her get up and scare the hell out of people, but Wanda was really always sweet to me, and so Jack was just a different personality. He was sweet to everybody, but he also could see the poet in everyone. And that's what he built, that's what he nurtured. So I wrote a poem for him after he passed, and it's called Ode to Jack Hirschman. Jack persisted, insisted, consisted. He was a revolutionary from the marrow. Inside his large stature lived a great heart, a great mind, a powerfully unique genius. His face and heart were aligned. What you saw is what you got with Jack. Never a false note. Even his silences were poetic. Jack's eyes looked wary, but always joyful. He rejoiced in the small things most of us ignored. Yet he relished big concepts, big projects, the language that carried big imaginations. I met Jack in my early 20s. He was in his 40s. He wore a disheveled coat, blonde hair across shoulders, centered on his crusted face, a mustache of an old bard of embattlements. Jack thundered out his poetry, shaking pillar and pew, inside a crumbling hall like a riveter of words. I myself worked in steel mills and foundries. Nobody sang my labor agonies and heartaches like Jack. Jack kept doors open in the seemingly closed circle of poets, an almost secret society he made accessible for everyone. Jack saw the street in me, but also the sweep of imagery and refrain I'd gathered from dirt and pavement. He became the kindest friend and guide to many, many poets. For me, he was my father, my poetry father, raising an irate son from the depths of work, jails, and drugs, so I could create music of the mills, a menagerie of muses. Jack plucked from muddy ground the tattered flag of the storied revolutionaries of our time. As U.S. imperial forces and the weight of fear, blindness, compromise, or narrow mindsets destroyed or mutated radical edifices. No end was the end. Every end an initiation. From Jack, I flew high that banner in my lyrics and lectures. Go forward, leave what is deadening behind, move on with what is blood-filled and daring. Jack, my friend, my mentor, my comrade, he was always beginning. And I don't want to take up too much time, but we have an audience here, so we're going to make the most of it. I don't mind reading a lot of things that I'm no longer proud of, but they're kind of part of the story, so I always do that. Besides, after I stopped all the drugs, I drank for 20 years on top of that. So I was like 28 years, 27 years in a big haze, lost in one form or the other. And so one of my things that I did when I was in my 20s is I had all these drinking partners, just like I had all my, my carga partners, I guess. And one of them was this one woman who we just loved hanging around each other, even though we were mostly drunk when we did. So this is called Rosalie Has Candles. Rosalie has candles in a circle around her bed. One night, as I lay on a couch in a tequila stupor, she takes off my shoes and trousers, pulls a cover over me, and snips 2 inches of hair from my head. She places the hair in a glass near the candles. I don't know why. I don't know why she searches for me. I don't know how she finds me in the bars. I don't know why she ridicules the women I like and uses me to meet men. Rosalie usually finds solace in a glass of whiskey. In my face, she finds the same thing. I don't know why. We argue too much. We feign caring and then hurt each other with indifference. With others, we are tough and mean, but in the quiet of darkness, we hold each other and caress like kittens. She said she can only make love to someone when she's drunk. She says she loves men but has lesbian friends. She loves being looked at, I want to hide. She hates struggle, that's all I do. She has gods to pray to, I just curse. I don't know what she sees in my face or hands for that matter. I only know I need her like whiskey. So these poems are not poems I read all the time, but I thought I would share some of them. And I'm going to read you a poem that I wrote in Chicago. Chicago is my home for 15 years. And I will have to say that after I left LA and I was getting involved with the poetry scene here, we did, with my good friend Manasar Gambo, we started our gallery in Echo Park, Galeria Ocaso. It's all Chicano, beautiful. And Gronk, the artist, was here the other day, and he did one of the first exhibits we ever did. And it was amazing what he did. A whole thing about the Titanic. I mean, Gronk was like, he's in his own world, and it was just amazing. And I was a poetry curator. So we had a lot of poets, a lot of performances and everything. We just couldn't pay the rent after a while, and it died, like everything. But I go to Echo Park now to see all those galleries, and I wish I can go in there and just tell them, I started the first one, but they don't care. They don't know. It's not about what that is. But I feel bad because it was a really beautiful space. Anyway, I moved to Chicago in '85, and it took me maybe 2 or 3 years, but I got involved with the poetry scene there because poetry slams were being born out of there, 85, 86, I think. And I would walk into the Green Mill Lounge and just watch these people, and then I thought, maybe I can do this, kind of like me, honorary, I can do it. Of course I can't do it, but I did it anyway. And I was a terrible slam poet, but I did it. And I got to know a lot of great people, and that's how Tia Chucha Press started. It started with us publishing the slam poets of Chicago, and eventually became a national, anybody that was doing great poetry. And so I was really close friends with all the great poets that were doing stuff there. Patricia Smith, of course, and Lisa Boscani, and Tony Fitzpatrick, and all these slam poets that were big then, even though now it's all changed, it's all become. And I have to add one thing, I might have said this before. I went to Mark Hippo High School in Alhambra. And last year, Get Lit does this beautiful slam poetry high school thing. Last year, Mark Hippo High School won. It's kind of amazing. It's like they won this big, huge slam. So this past year, I went to that school to present to them. For the first time in 50 years, I walked in there. I had hated that school. I had a hard time at that school. I didn't want to ever set foot there, but now it's really changed, and they're into slam poetry, and they were very beautiful to me, so it was really great. I'm going to read you this poem. It's just a silly poem. It's called Lips. I sat in Chicago traffic, waiting for a light to change. My fingers scored a rhythm on top of the middle door while faces stared down from third floor bay windows. Not to intrude, but from behind a blue Toyota, I spotted them. Lips. Perfect red with thin creases and slightly opened. Lips like candy encased in a rectangular side view mirror. My car was just behind the Toyota, the back of a woman's head in front of me, but in the mirror, just lips. Enormous as they rubbed the sides of the plastic rim. The lips took off after the next green. I pressed the accelerator, unmindful of the old lady trying to cross the street with bags on both arms. I was compelled to look at those lips, even as they rushed through a yellow light, forcing me to risk the red. The lips carry with them the soul of skin, the summer of a smile taking me home, lips like being cradled in a soft rain, making me do a perfect backflip into wet memory, lips whispering into my ear, licking the side of my mouth, hiding secrets behind honeyed faces. It didn't matter what the woman looked like, she had lips. Then the turn signals flashed and lips made a left-hand turn. I continued on over the ruptured streets, thinking of lips to the flames of afternoon traffic. So that's an example of anything can be poetry. Even some lips you see from behind a car, you know. So I'm gonna read you another poem. And again, I used to read this more often. I haven't read it in a long time, but now you guys might have heard it. It became a hip hop song for a while. What happened is I went to Italy and my friend Flycat, who was a big hip hop star there at the time, invited me, went to Milan, and he recorded me doing this poetry, and then he created this beautiful, beautiful rhythm. And you'll hear it if you go to YouTube and you look up Civilization by Luis Rodriguez, you can hear it there. I think it's on Spotify too. I got a lot of stuff on Spotify with my music and poetry, but this one is very special, and it's called Civilization. And I have to thank Flycat and the Italian. I say it was for a short time he became a big hip hop star, and he put it on one of his CDs. And for not even 15 minutes, for a minute, I had fame in Italy as a hip hop star. And they actually interviewed me on, they have the #1 TV channel, it's called Numero Uno. And I was on it. They were interviewing. I don't speak Italian. It didn't matter. It was great. And then that was it. At the end, Luis Rodriguez never went back. You know how that goes. But I was really proud of it. And it starts with this. So this is a poem about big things. Another poem about lips is about those small things that you see. This is a poem about the big issues. And it's called Civilization. And it has a statement by Fenton Johnson that says, "I am tired of building up somebody else's civilization. There are days when sunshine is toxic, when breathing becomes fatal and the love stares of innocence have fangs. There are days when caresses are lethal drumming and the low murmur of a child's voice is a hand slap of hell flames across my face. When all civilization is a squabble in my partner's gaze and morality is a gun in my head. I didn't make this place. So what if I say you can eat it and choke, this heart a choke, this diet of hypocrisies, this horse feed of fed horses, the salt seasoning all wounds. Tear it down, then wake me up when it's over. Should I care if you don't care? Should I sweat the details when the whole enchilada reeks? Just because you wear a hat and call that fashion, because you love the prison and hate the alien. Don't come to me whining about your lost glories. They are lashes on slave skin, the gold stolen off the blanket of stones called our land. They are the tongues cut from wiser heads, the devoured, dehydrated sirens that called you, then were slaughtered. Don't cry for me, Argentina, or Pennsylvania for that matter. You say I'm no good, but my pathologies are what's keeping me from cutting your throats. All enslavers, all exploiters, all engravers of God money. You who see my children and go insane, who wear the flesh of Nahuas like shiny suits, who have black heels in your nightmares, who eat with Chez severed hands, who feed your wives to dogs on cracked plates, who provide heroin to chiseled daughters, who bathe in the trail of tears, who sell tickets to the Middle Passage, whose academies hold literature hostage, and whose culture crumbles in the hand of a glue-sniffing Chicano child. Again, maybe a couple poems, because we've been enriched today with all this poetry and all these great stories. And I love to tell stories with my poems. People say, hey, why don't you get to the poems? I go, I'm already in the poetry when I'm telling stories. It's all part of it, you know what I'm saying? I don't separate them. The poems are there, but most of the stories is part of it. Because I remember one time I was in New York City, and I was reading, and somebody was, get to the poetry. I said, I started the poetry already, dude. You're not paying attention, you know. So anyway, I don't mind telling stories. So I'm going to read the poem that I gave to Rich for this book. Beautiful book. You got to get Beat Not Beat. It has got the most amazing poets, the most amazing work. It's going to be there for a long time. It's got a long life. And you can order it to Tia Chucha's as well as anywhere else. But Tia Chucha's, tiachucha.org/bookstore. You'll find it, order it there. You could come to Tia Chucha's and get it here. And of course, wherever Rich and the other poets go around, please show up. This is what makes poetry happen. So I'm going to end with this poem, and it's the poem that I have in the book. It's perhaps, right? I forget. Yes. Oh, come on, my God, I'm thinking. Maybe I gave him another book. You know, I have these great anthologies that are coming up, but this is one of my favorites. I even told Rich, this anthology stands alone. It's beautiful. So perhaps it goes like this. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you for coming to Tia Chucha's. And we have an altar to Tia Chucha's memory. And had somebody came here the other day and says, why are you worshiping the dead? And you can tell that her spirituality was different than ours. I says, we don't worship. This is honoring and respecting. We don't worship dead. We don't worship. And plus, Day of the Dead, all that's really about life. People think it's all about dead. No, it's about life. And that's really, and she was open to it after a while, because she's like, what? She never heard of this stuff. And she thinks you shouldn't get near the dead. I go, there's nothing to be afraid about the dead. You know, only other people tell you the dead is bad. Dead is part of life. You go on. Life keeps going. So perhaps goes like this. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, everybody. Perhaps when the stories are lost and pleasure is a dry river, and what makes the flesh sing is a long gone supplication, we may find our true names. Perhaps when the earth's rotation stops, when the moon has wilted and the sun's rays scorch down the squandered ground, we may uncover our inner eye. Perhaps when the poisons that once were our sustenance and the radiation that once gave us light now foster our insatiable hungers and an abiding darkness, we may know what truly feeds and guides us. Perhaps after we've created so many borders, so many walls, and conjured up even more laws to make even more lawless, we may realize it's ourselves who've been made illegal. It's our spirits we've alienized. Perhaps when parents lose their final grasp on their children, they will finally grasp that their sole purpose is to bring loved, healthy, and understood children into this world, to remake the universe better and more holy each time. Perhaps when the wars in the names of countless gods, which look and act like those who evoke them, finally end, we may realize that God is the unnameable, unobtrusive wind that caresses our cheeks, the rain that falls on us all, the air that enters our lungs, and the nerves in our brains, so we can name whatever God we want. Perhaps when all the textbooks and written histories and science papers cease, we'll understand that nature and our own natures are the source of all knowledge, language, and histories, and we'll always be able to rewrite them, reimagine them, and reweave them into the world. Perhaps when love has become the embers of what we hate, the residue of what we've destroyed, we'll know that love is the stream that flows through each and every one of us, the water we thirst for in the deserts of our days, the ocean from which all our tears, full of salt and unmet desires, surges and flows. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Luis J. Rodriguez. I just want to say a couple things real quick. As I said earlier, when I first started, S.A., is that you back there? Oh, holy cow, come up. Because I was just getting ready to, no, you got to come up, because I was just getting ready to thank you again. Holy cow. S.A. Griffin, one of my fellow editors. Why don't you read your poem real quick?
No, I don't want to read my poem.
No? Well,
all right.
at least stand up here with me.
Just say hi.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Hi. Thank you.
It's great essay is here because I can say it into you in person. First,
Stage you.
yeah. As I said earlier, when I first came up with the idea for the book, there were a core group of poets that I wanted to have involved. Luis, Lynn Thompson, to honor our LA Poet Laureates, but also Bob Kaufman and Wanda Coleman. And so I'm glad we were able to honor them today. What I was also going to say about you and Alexis and Kim Shuck, SA and the other editors really helped to make this book something bigger and better than I could have ever imagined. And between these covers is really a dream come true for me. So, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you say
Oh,
something.
just thanks to all the people who, because there's a lot of love in this. It'll stop any thief, and it'll hold your door open with style. But no, it's a lot of love went into this, and I'm honored to be a part of it, and honored to be here today to hear you guys read, actually. So, and you need to sign my book.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you, Rich.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of as essay was saying, you could bludgeon someone with this, but we'd rather you read it, tell others about it, buy it here in live stream land, buy it here online or wherever you buy your books. Again, thanks to Annette Cruz, Dennis Cruz, Louisette Resto, Matt Cedillo, our first inaugural Spotlight Beat Not Beat poet, former LA Poet Laureate, Luis J. Rodriguez. Thanks to all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being out there. Beat Not Beat.